I'll never be your shadow again, witch.
My wife and I had been married for 8 years, and honestly, things had been deteriorating for a while. Nothing explosive or dramatic, just these small, accumulating changes that individually seemed insignificant, but together created this undeniable pattern. She'd suddenly change topics when I walked into the room during her work calls, become intensely absorbed in her phone whenever I tried to have a real conversation about our day. And there was this emotional distance that kept growing between us like a slow-moving glacier. Then, one Saturday afternoon, while she was mindlessly scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my existence, she casually dropped this bomb. "Oh yeah, by the way, there's this work thing happening next weekend. You should probably come along." Not, "I'd really love for you to meet my colleagues," or "It should be a fun time, let's go together." Just this half-hearted, "You should probably come," that sounded more like she was fulfilling some obligation than actually wanting my company. The phrasing alone should have set off alarm bells in my head, but I agreed anyway. Part of me was genuinely curious about her professional environment, and another part wanted to understand what was really happening in this marriage that seemed to be crumbling in slow motion. The company cookout was scheduled at their corporate headquarters, one of those sleek modern office buildings with an expansive outdoor patio area designed for exactly these kinds of events. The moment we pulled into the visitor parking lot, I noticed an immediate shift in my wife's entire demeanor. Her posture changed. She started walking with deliberate speed, creating physical distance between us without being overtly obvious about it. When her coworkers wandered over to exchange pleasantries and say hello, her introductions were painfully generic and detached. "This is my husband," she'd announce in this flat tone, never once using my actual name, never mentioning what I do for a living, never adding any personal details that might make me seem like an actual human being with accomplishments or interests. Just my husband, like I was some interchangeable accessory she'd grabbed on her way out the door that morning. What really struck me, what genuinely hurt if I'm being honest, was observing how dramatically her personality transformed throughout the afternoon, depending on my proximity. When I stood next to her, she became this quiet, almost withdrawn version of herself, barely participating in conversations, offering minimal engagement with anyone around us. But whenever I stepped away to grab another beer from the cooler or use the restroom facilities, I could observe her from across the patio, and she was completely different. She was animated, laughing enthusiastically with the sales team guys, being witty and charming and fully present in ways she never seemed to be around me anymore. The stark contrast between these two versions of my wife was honestly more insulting than if she'd just been consistently cold. Look, I'm not saying I'm some prize catch, but I'm also not someone to be embarrassed about. I run my own successful contracting business specializing in commercial renovations. I maintain decent physical fitness by hitting the gym regularly, and I know how to dress appropriately for different occasions. But watching her behavior that afternoon, observing how she treated my presence like some burden she had to endure, you'd think she'd accidentally married someone completely beneath her social standing and was desperately counting down the minutes until she could drop me back home and forget I existed. What made it even more obvious was her escape pattern. Every single time someone initiated a conversation that might naturally include me or draw me into the discussion, she'd suddenly discover some urgent reason to be elsewhere. One of her coworkers started talking enthusiastically about his brand new truck he'd just purchased, and she literally walked away mid-conversation like she'd remembered something critical. Another colleague mentioned his upcoming camping trip to Yellowstone, and she abruptly developed this pressing need to check her work emails. The pattern was unmistakable, the message brutally clear. I was there strictly for appearances to prove she had a husband, and even that minimal role seemed to be stretching her comfort level to its absolute limits. By the time we hit hour 3 of this torturous event, I was completely done playing the role of invisible spouse at my own wife's company gathering. I found myself standing near the beverage table, just quietly observing the social dynamics of her workplace, trying to understand what had happened to the woman I'd married, when I noticed someone actually looking at me with genuine interest, rather than that polite tolerance everyone else had been offering all afternoon. Her boss, the vice president of operations I'd heard referenced in passing, but had never actually met. She was probably in her early 40s, carried herself with that particular brand of confidence that truly successful people seem to possess naturally, And unlike literally everyone else who'd given me those awkward, half-hearted nods throughout the day, she was looking at me like I was actually worth her time and attention, and she was walking directly toward me with clear purpose. "You must be the mysterious husband I keep hearing about," she said with this genuinely warm smile, extending her hand in greeting. "I'm Jessica, VP of Operations here." Her handshake was solid and firm, her eye contact direct and unwavering. Immediately, right from that first interaction, she was treating me with more basic human respect than my own wife had demonstrated all afternoon. "Mysterious?" I asked, genuinely curious about that description. "Well, your wife talks about work constantly, practically lives and breathes company business, but she's incredibly secretive about her personal life. Makes people naturally curious about what she's hiding." She gestured casually toward the beverage table. "Mind if I join you for a bit? These mandatory company events can be mentally exhausting." We started talking, and the conversation just flowed effortlessly in a way conversations should, but often don't. She asked thoughtful questions about my contracting business, seemed genuinely fascinated when I described some of the commercial renovation projects I'd recently completed. She laughed appreciatively at my observations about the cookout's social dynamics, and for the first time since we'd arrived that morning, I felt myself actually relaxing into the moment. After we'd been talking for maybe 20 minutes, she said something that caught me completely off guard. "I have to admit, I'm genuinely surprised right now." "Surprised about what, exactly?" "Based on how your wife describes her home situation, I was honestly expecting to meet someone completely different from you." That statement immediately grabbed my full attention. "How exactly does she describe her home situation?" She paused, clearly realizing she might have ventured into uncomfortable territory and possibly said more than she should have. "Oh, you know how workplace dynamics go. People vent about their relationships sometimes. Nothing too specific or detailed." But that hesitation, that careful pause, told me absolutely everything I needed to know. My wife had been actively complaining about me to her boss, painting some unflattering picture that made this woman expect to encounter someone disappointing and underwhelming. "What kind of person were you expecting to meet?" I asked directly, wanting the honest truth. She laughed, but there was definite discomfort in it now. "Honestly, someone less articulate, less engaging, less sharp. She makes it sound like you two exist in completely separate worlds, with nothing meaningful to connect over." I glanced across the patio to where my wife was deeply absorbed in animated conversation with three guys from the accounting department, laughing enthusiastically at something one of them had said. She hadn't looked in my direction even once in the past half hour. "Apparently we do," I said quietly. Jessica followed my gaze, and I watched her expression shift as she started putting pieces together. "She's incredibly ambitious, your wife. Sometimes people become so intensely focused on their career trajectory, on climbing that corporate ladder, that they lose sight of everything else that matters." "Is that your diplomatic executive way of saying she's been bad-mouthing her husband to advance her career?" "I didn't say that specifically." "You didn't have to say it." She studied me for a long moment with new appreciation. "You're considerably sharper than she gives you credit for being. And you're more genuinely honest than most people in senior management positions tend to be." That comment earned me an authentic laugh. "Careful, or I might start thinking you're far too good for this particular crowd." The irony of the situation wasn't remotely lost on me. Here was my wife's boss, someone who'd known me for barely half an hour, demonstrating more genuine appreciation for my company and conversation than my own spouse had shown in the past several months. We continued talking about everything from business development strategies to favorite travel destinations to local restaurant recommendations, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the interaction more than I had enjoyed anything in weeks. "You know what I find really interesting?" Jessica said, lowering her voice slightly and leaning in. "Half the women in this office regularly complain about their husbands being emotionally disengaged or lacking ambition or motivation. Your wife complains about exactly the opposite problem. She says you're too absorbed in your own business ventures, too independent and self-sufficient. She explicitly says you don't need her for anything, like that's somehow a character flaw." I felt this cold wave of realization wash over me. My wife wasn't embarrassed by any failures or shortcomings on my part. She was actively threatened by my successes and independence. She wanted a husband she could control and manage, someone whose confidence and self-sufficiency didn't challenge her psychological need to be the undisputed star of every single room she entered. That's a fascinating perspective on the situation, I said carefully, processing this revelation. I thought so too when I first heard it. She checked her watch quickly. I should probably circulate and mingle with some other people, but I have to say this has genuinely been the most intelligent, engaging conversation I've had all afternoon. As she started to walk away toward another group, she suddenly paused and turned back toward me. Actually, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, if you don't mind. She walked back closer, clearly choosing her words with deliberate care. Would you possibly be interested in getting coffee with me sometime? I mean, are you available for something like that? The question hung there in the space between us, and there was absolutely no mistaking what she was really asking. This wasn't about business networking, or professional connections, or casual friendship. This was an accomplished, attractive woman expressing clear romantic interest in someone she had assumed was available and unattached. I felt this complicated mixture of genuine flattery and vindication surging through me. Here was this successful, confident woman who'd spent 30 minutes with me and concluded I was worth pursuing, worth getting to know better. Meanwhile, my wife had spent the entire afternoon acting like my mere presence was some inconvenience she had to reluctantly tolerate for the sake of appearances. That's an extremely flattering offer, I said, keeping my voice level and measured. But I'm married. I gestured across the patio toward my wife, who remained completely engrossed in her conversation with the accounting team, still not having glanced in my direction once. Jessica followed my gesture, and I watched her facial expression transform from mild embarrassment to genuine shock and confusion. "She's your wife?" she asked, and there was something profound in her tone that suggested she was mentally reassessing every single thing we'd just discussed. For 8 years now, actually. I had absolutely no idea she never... Jessica stopped herself mid-sentence, but I could easily fill in those blanks. My wife never acted like someone who was married, never mentioned me in any positive context, never gave even the slightest indication that she had a husband worth acknowledging or appreciating. Never what exactly? Never acts like someone who's in a happy marriage, she said with complete honesty. I mean, she vents about relationship frustrations constantly, but she never once mentioned being married to someone like you, someone accomplished and articulate and engaging. Before I could formulate any response to that loaded statement, I heard familiar footsteps approaching rapidly from behind me. My wife had finally noticed that her boss was having an extended conversation with me, and, judging by her accelerated pace and tense expression, she definitely wasn't pleased about this development. "There you are," my wife announced, suddenly appearing right next to me with this aggressively forced smile plastered across her face. "I was looking everywhere for you." She was blatantly lying, and we all knew it. She hadn't been looking for me at all. She'd been perfectly content to let me entertain myself in isolation while she worked the room and networked without me cramping her carefully cultivated professional style. But now that she'd observed me having what appeared to be an engaged, animated conversation with her direct boss, suddenly, my exact whereabouts had become critically important to her. "I was just getting better acquainted with your husband," Jessica said smoothly, her voice professionally neutral. "He's quite an impressive person." "Oh, he certainly can be," my wife replied, but her tone strongly suggested this wasn't necessarily a compliment or positive attribute. Jessica glanced back and forth between us, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her mind as she put pieces together. This woman hadn't climbed to VP by being oblivious to interpersonal dynamics. She was witnessing firsthand the exact toxic dynamic I'd been living with for months, seeing it play out in real time. "I was just telling him how much I genuinely enjoy continuing our conversation over coffee sometime in the near future," Jessica said deliberately, and I immediately realized she was testing something, probing the situation. My wife's reaction was instantaneous and visceral. Her forced smile completely vanished, entirely replaced by this unmistakable look of panic mixed with possessiveness that I recognized immediately. "Coffee?" my wife repeated, and there was a sharp edge to her voice that I knew well. "Just a friendly conversation between adults," Jessica clarified diplomatically, though all three of us understood it had been significantly more than friendly professional interest. The three of us stood there forming this awkward triangle, and I found myself in the unique position of watching my wife experience intense jealousy over someone she'd been treating like an embarrassing liability all afternoon. The irony was almost darkly amusing. Jessica excused herself gracefully after a moment, leaving my wife and me alone together for the first time since we'd arrived at this godforsaken event. The absolute moment her boss was safely out of earshot, my wife's carefully maintained composure completely shattered. "What the hell was that about?" she demanded in a harsh whisper, keeping her voice low enough that nearby coworkers couldn't overhear, but her anger was barely contained. What about?" I asked with deliberate calmness. "You were openly flirting with my boss. At my company event." I stared at her for a long moment, really letting that absurd accusation fully sink in. After enduring hours of being systematically ignored, casually dismissed, and treated like unwanted baggage, she had the audacity to accuse me of inappropriate behavior simply because someone had finally shown me basic human respect and engaged conversation. Your boss was being polite and genuinely engaging in conversation. You should consider trying it sometime instead of acting ashamed of your own husband. Her eyes flashed with immediate anger at my response. Don't you dare try to turn this situation around on me. She was clearly, obviously hitting on you. And that bothers you why exactly? Because you're my husband, she hissed. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That's funny. You could have easily fooled me and everyone else here. You've spent this entire afternoon actively pretending I don't exist. That's absolutely not true. Really? Then when exactly did you introduce me by my actual name to anyone here? When did you include me in even a single conversation? When did you act like anything other than deeply ashamed to be seen with me in front of your colleagues? She opened her mouth to argue, then abruptly closed it again. We both knew with absolute certainty that I was completely right. Look, she said after a pause, lowering her voice further and nervously glancing around to ensure nobody was actively listening to us. This is my workplace. These people are critically important to my career advancement. I need to maintain a very specific professional image here. And what image is that exactly? Professional, serious, competent, someone they can envision in senior leadership positions. And having a husband who runs his own successful business somehow undermines that image? She hesitated noticeably, and in that prolonged pause I could hear absolutely everything she wasn't directly saying out loud. It's not specifically about your business, she finally said. It's about overall presentation and optics. The way you dress, how you communicate, your general demeanor. It's very working class. And there it was. The fundamental truth she'd been carefully dancing around for months, finally spoken out loud. She was genuinely embarrassed by me because I didn't fit her meticulously crafted vision of executive-level sophistication and polish. Never mind that my working-class business was actually generating more income than her corporate salary. Never mind that I'd worked my way through state college and built something substantial from absolutely nothing. Working class, I repeated slowly, letting the words hang there. You understand what I mean. These people attended prestigious universities like Harvard and Yale. They wear designer label clothing, drive luxury vehicles, discuss wine tastings and foreign cinema and contemporary art, and I don't fit neatly into your aspirational country club fantasy world. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's exactly, precisely what you're saying. You're saying I'm an embarrassment to your carefully cultivated professional image. You're admitting you're genuinely ashamed to be married to someone like me. She looked around nervously again, clearly worried about appearances. Keep your voice down. People might hear us. Why should I? Worried your precious colleagues might overhear and suddenly realize you're married to someone you consider beneath your social standards? You're being completely ridiculous and dramatic. Am I really? Because your boss just spent 30 solid minutes talking to me like I was an actual human being worth knowing and understanding. She was genuinely interested in my opinions, my business ventures, my perspectives on various topics. She demonstrated more authentic respect for me in half an hour than you've managed to show in months. She was just being professionally polite. No, she was being genuine and authentic. There's a significant difference between those things. And the fact that you can't distinguish between them explains absolutely everything about our fundamental problems. My wife's face was visibly reddening now, though I couldn't determine if it was from anger or embarrassment or some combination. You don't understand the immense pressure I'm under in this environment. I'm actively trying to secure a promotion to senior director. I cannot afford to have people thinking. Thinking what exactly? That you're married to someone who actually built something tangible instead of just climbing corporate ladders and playing office politics? That you chose a husband based on character and integrity instead of pedigree and credentials? You're deliberately twisting everything I'm saying. I'm clarifying everything you're avoiding saying directly. You want a husband who functions as an accessory to your career ambitions, someone you can strategically show off at company events, who'll make other people think you've truly arrived and made it. And when you look at me honestly, you don't see that idealized image. She was quiet for an extended moment, and I could see her visibly struggling with exactly how much uncomfortable truth to actually admit out loud. Maybe we simply want fundamentally different things from this marriage, she said eventually. Maybe we do. But here's what I find particularly interesting about this entire situation. What's that? You've spent the past several months systematically making me feel like I'm not good enough for you, like I'm actively holding you back from the life you truly deserve. But the precise moment another woman demonstrates genuine interest in me, suddenly I'm worth fighting for and defending. That's exactly what this is about. You don't actually want me, but you absolutely don't want anyone else to have me either. You want to keep me around as your backup plan while you figure out if you can somehow do better. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I know something else that might interest you. She waited expectantly. I know that your boss is still standing over by the dessert table, and she keeps periodically glancing over here like she's genuinely wondering how this intense conversation is progressing. My wife's head immediately whipped around to look, and sure enough, Jessica was watching us with unmistakable interest from across the patio. You know what else I know? I continued calmly. I know that I'm completely done apologizing for not being the idealized husband you apparently wish you'd married. And I'm definitely done pretending that being systematically disrespected by my own wife is somehow normal or acceptable behavior. What exactly are you saying right now? I'm saying that maybe it's finally time we both got exactly what we really want from life. My wife stared at me, her mind visibly trying to process what I just said. Before she could formulate any coherent response, I was already walking away from her. I headed directly toward the dessert table where Jessica was standing, pretending to carefully consider the available options, while obviously keeping one eye on our heated conversation. She looked up as I approached, and I could see this mixture of curiosity and concern clearly written across her face. I've been thinking seriously about your coffee invitation, I said without any preamble. Oh, she glanced past me toward where my wife was still standing, completely frozen in place. And what did you decide? I'd like to take you up on that offer. My schedule just cleared up considerably and permanently. She raised an eyebrow thoughtfully. That appeared to be quite an intense conversation you two were having. It was long overdue, honestly. Turns out my wife has extremely specific ideas about what type of husband would optimally benefit her career trajectory, and I don't fit that profile at all. I see. She studied my face carefully. Are you absolutely certain about this decision? Making major life choices when emotions are running this high isn't always the wisest approach. I genuinely appreciated that she was offering me a graceful exit, a chance to reconsider, but I had never been more certain about anything in my entire life. I'm not making some rash heat-of-the-moment decision here. I'm finally acknowledging a decision that was effectively made for me months ago. My wife mentally and emotionally checked out of this marriage when she decided I was an embarrassment to her professional aspirations. I'm just tired of being the only person still trying to make this work. Jessica nodded slowly, understanding. And you're comfortable with all the potential complications this might create? This situation could get extremely messy. The mess already exists and has existed for months. I'm just finally dealing with it directly instead of pretending everything's fine. She smiled then, and it was the first genuinely warm, authentic smile I'd seen all day. Well, in that case, I know a fantastic coffee shop downtown. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? Completely and totally free. We exchanged phone numbers, and I could physically feel my wife's eyes burning intensely into my back from across the patio. When I finally turned around, she was marching toward us with barely controlled panic written all over her face. "What are you doing?" she hissed urgently when she reached us. "I'm accepting an invitation from someone who actually values and appreciates my company," I said with complete calm. "You cannot be serious about this." "I'm extremely serious. You wanted a husband who wouldn't embarrass you at professional events. Excellent news. After today, you won't have to worry about that problem anymore." Jessica cleared her throat diplomatically. "I think I should give you two some privacy to sort this out." "Actually," I said firmly, "we're done sorting anything out. My wife got exactly what she wanted. She doesn't have to be ashamed of me anymore because she doesn't have to be associated with me at all going forward. You're massively overreacting to everything, my wife said, but her voice was noticeably shaky now. Am I really? Let me ask you one direct question. When your boss asked if I was available, what was your immediate gut reaction? What went through your mind? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. I'll tell you what went through mine in that moment. I realized that a complete stranger saw more genuine value in me after 30 minutes of conversation than my own wife has demonstrated in the past entire year. That's not overreacting. That's achieving clarity. We can work through this together. We can go to marriage counseling. We can fix this. Work through what exactly? Your fundamental belief that I'm socially beneath you? Your deep embarrassment about who you actually married? The fact that you've been actively bad-mouthing me to your colleagues for months? I never explicitly... Your boss literally just told me she was expecting to meet someone disappointing and underwhelming based on how you consistently describe your home life. So either you've been lying to her about me, or you've been lying to me about your true feelings. Which is it? My wife looked around desperately, probably finally realizing that several of her coworkers were now openly watching our dramatic confrontation unfold in real time. The irony was absolutely not lost on me. She'd spent the entire day worried about her professional image, and now she was having a complete public marital meltdown at a company event. You're going to destroy everything I've worked for, she whispered desperately. No, you systematically destroyed this marriage when you decided your husband was a professional liability instead of a life partner. I'm just refusing to participate in my own disrespect anymore. I pulled out my car keys. I'll be staying at my brother's place tonight and probably for the foreseeable future. You can have the house entirely to yourself to think seriously about whether this is really the life you want. You can't just walk away like this. Watch me do exactly that. I started walking purposefully toward the parking lot, then stopped and turned back one final time. Oh, and one more thing. When you're explaining to everyone in the office on Monday morning why your husband publicly left you at the company cookout, you might want to consider telling them the complete truth. That you got exactly what you always wanted. A chance to be precisely as professional and sophisticated as you think you deserve to be, just without me supposedly holding you back. I could hear her desperately calling my name as I walked to my car, but I didn't turn around even once. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly again. My phone buzzed with a text message before I'd even exited the parking lot. It was from Jessica. Coffee at 2 p.m. tomorrow, Corner Cafe on 5th Street. I have a strong feeling we're going to have a lot to talk about. I smiled as I typed back quickly. Looking forward to it more than you know. Behind me, my wife was probably still standing in that parking lot, finally understanding what it truly felt like to be embarrassed in front of colleagues. The crucial difference was that her embarrassment was completely earned. 3 months later, I'm sitting across from the woman who changed my life. She's laughing at something I said about a tricky client. What started as casual coffee meetups turned into dinner dates, then weekend trips, and finally something I hadn't felt in years. An honest, equal relationship built on real respect and care. Her name's Jessica. She's everything my ex-wife pretended to admire but never truly valued. She's smart, successful, and confident. But most importantly, she respects those same qualities in me instead of feeling threatened by them. You know what's strange? She said, reaching out to touch my hand. Your ex made you sound like a disaster. I keep waiting to find out what's wrong with you. What's the catch? Maybe there isn't one, I replied. Maybe she just wanted something different. Like what? I paused. Someone who made her look good without ever outshining her. Someone who'd stay small so she could shine brighter. Someone who'd be so grateful for her attention he wouldn't question how she treated him. That sounds miserable, Jessica said softly. It was, I admitted. She squeezed my hand with a smile. Her loss, my win. The irony isn't lost on either of us. I'm now dating my ex-wife's former boss, the woman who saw my worth when my own spouse didn't. And yes, my ex has to see us together at company events. We went public with our relationship not out of spite, but because we're proud of it. Jessica talks about me to her colleagues with pride. She respects my work and never makes me feel like I should shrink myself. The divorce became official 2 weeks ago. My ex tried to stop it once she realized I wasn't bluffing, but it was far too late. You can't fake respect, and you can't forget the words that cut too deep. Her image at work took a hit too. People remembered how she humiliated me at that company cookout, Her promotion quietly disappeared from the table. Meanwhile, Jessica introduced my company to several major clients. In just 2 months, I signed 3 big contracts. She celebrates my wins like they're hers because that's what real partners do. They lift each other up. I have some news, Jessica said, bringing me back to the moment. Good or bad? Depends. Your ex just requested a transfer to the Denver office. Running from it all? I asked. She probably couldn't handle seeing us every day. Hard to keep up a perfect image when everyone remembers your meltdown. How do you feel about it? Honestly, relieved. It'll make everything simpler. She gets a clean slate and we get less drama. I nodded. I didn't feel revengeful. I also didn't feel guilty. Choices have consequences. Jessica smiled. I'd rather talk about our future than her past. Our future? My lease ends next month, she said. I've been thinking, maybe it's time for more space, for both of us. I looked at her, the woman who believed in me when I'd nearly forgotten how to believe in myself. She gave me back my confidence. She made me feel like a partner, not a project. I think that sounds perfect, I said. Later that night, walking through downtown, Jessica stopped and grinned. You know what I realized? What? Your ex was right about one thing. You were too good for her. She just got it backward. She thought you weren't polished enough for her world. The truth is, you were too real for her games. I pulled her close and kissed her right there on the sidewalk. I didn't care who saw. I'd learned something powerful that day at the cookout. Life's too short to waste on someone who doesn't actually want you. My ex wanted a husband who made her look good. Jessica wants a partner who makes her feel good. That difference changed everything. Now, I never have to pretend. She loves me for who I truly am, straightforward, working-class roots and all. She sees my honesty as strength, not weakness. And that changed my entire world.